I'm Mark Raymond from Open Road Consulting. If there's one conversation that makes a difference to teams' performance and morale, it's the conversation that we have when we're sharing our perspectives and experiences of one another to one another, also known as feedback conversations. You may have worked in teams before where this was commonplace and this happened well, and would have seen firsthand the experience and impact in terms of high levels of trust, connection, team performance improving, and people's development going off the charts. At an individual level, rather than worrying or wondering about what other people think of our work or being oblivious to where we might be falling short, it's much better to know what other people think so we can really focus on amplifying our strengths, which we might not even be tuned into, and also focusing on what we need to work on. And let's face it, we all need to work on things from time to time, and there's nothing wrong with that. You see, even for the most self-aware people, it is very hard to see ourselves as other people see us. And that's why these conversations are so valuable. I had this experience when working with a client, and I'll call him Steve, a couple of years ago. Steve was a manager in a company and was known as he's the change agent person. And he would often be parachuted into sticky or tricky situations where things need to be changed really quickly. He had a fantastic capacity and a laser-like focus to identify the issues and had real drive, strength, determination to share his views. But it didn't always work for those around him because they didn't feel listened to and consulted as part of the process, and the change wouldn't last. And it wasn't until a conversation that Steve had with a colleague that the penny finally dropped. After a meeting that Steve and she and others were involved in, she called him and she asked him whether he knew how he was coming across in that meeting. And she went on to tell him, with his agreement, that for her, she felt like she was being bulldozed. And while she admired his determination and his passion and his focus on achieving the right thing for the business, she didn't feel listened to, because while he asked questions, she often felt cut off. And in the end, she was pretty resigned to the fact that it was Steve's way or the highway. And Steve was a little surprised by this feedback because from his cultural background, to be a strong leader meant you had to be strong in prosecuting your views, telling people what you thought, and to defer too much to others was a sign of weakness. But he was also relieved because he knew something wasn't quite right based on the responses he was getting from people. And finally, he knew what he had to work on. So in the course of our work together, we worked on maintaining his passion for the business, his drive and determination, but also paying more attention to listening to others. And he got much better results for the business, and his relationship improved as a consequence. There are a few things I want to say about how you can have these conversations in a way that gets constructive outcomes. The first thing I would say is to remember that the purpose of these conversations is not to pot people or to criticize them or to flatter them or butter them up. It's really to help offer perspectives that help them be the best that they can be, and they decide what they do with that. So more than anything, they're a conversation about care. There are three things that make a big difference to these conversations going well. The first is to remember that they are two-way conversations, not one way. All too often we can go into these conversations and often we're rushed and don't have a lot of time, and we can want them to be over quickly. And we can go in with the mindset of we want to just tell the person how it is, what we think, and let them deal with it. That often doesn't, or it never really works that well. See, sharing our assessments, in doing that, we are revealing things that are important to us about our own standards. And so it's important for the other person to be asking questions and exploring that so they understand what's important for us so they can go and deliver on that. The other thing that's important to remember is that we may be getting an experience of someone based on how we are with them, and we may be contributing to them doing things that aren't particularly helpful or that we don't like. So it's important to be open to the possibility of us working in different ways that are going to help them. The second thing is when we're listening to assessments of others, it can be really, really easy to put our armor on, to almost stiffen up the body and be ready for to defend any assessments we get from other people. The conversations don't go well when we do that either. So it can be really important to cultivate a real mood of curiosity and openness to learning. by remembering that we're having these conversations because they're really about helping us be better in our work, to have better careers, to build stronger relationships. So the other person is offering us a gift. And the other thing that's important to remember is what I alluded to before, that these assessments that others have, they often say things about us. Yes, that's true. But what also matters is that they involve sharing things that are important about other people and what they need. When we understand that more, we can do things that really hit the mark for them. The third thing is that when we're sharing assessments, it's important to be skillfully honest. Skillfully honest is about being sensitive to timing of these conversations. It's about owning these perspectives and assessments as not the truth about other people, but our views, and sharing our perspectives in that way. And it's about being honest about the impact. That's often when the penny drops for people, is when we share the impact for ourselves and for the business and for customers and so on. And lastly, we want to avoid the other people feeling resigned or complacent after these conversations. So it's important that we have a degree of measure when we're sharing our assessments. I hope these suggestions have been helpful. You can reach out to me by emailing me at mark@openroadconsulting.com.au if you have any questions or you'd like to have a chat. Thanks for listening.